What is up, y'all? I'm checking out a plugin today, and this is the Tone Suite Distant from WaveMind. I had a lot of people telling me in the comments of my videos here on YouTube, on Instagram, and on TikTok that I need to check this one out. So I sent them a DM asking if they'd like to do a collab, and they agreed. They sent me the plugin free of charge. So this is kind of a sponsored video, even though I'm not being paid, and they don't know that I'm making a video, and they don't get to see this video before it goes live. So, do with that information what you will. Now, Tone Suite Distant was created for the guitarist in the band Distant, Nori Yetgin, and this is designed after the actual amps, tones, and effects and everything that he would use live while on tour with Distant. So this is a signature amp plugin, and as you heard in the intro there, I think it sounds pretty great. It's got 3 different amps, it's got a ton of effects in there, and it's got a ton of options as far as shaping and sculpting the different guitar tones that you might get with it, and I'm pretty stoked on it. Let's check it out. So when you open up the plugin for the first time, this is what it's going to look like. You're going to get some ridiculous artwork here, so whoever did that art, kudos to y'all. That looks ridiculously sick. And you get what you would expect from an amp sim, right? We load up with the amp head. There are 3 different amps. We've got the Flesh Weaver, which is what it starts with. We have the Servant and the Nail Wound. And spoiler alert for those that maybe don't want to watch throughout the whole video, I did go through all 3 of these amp heads so you can skip ahead to the different tones that I get with them. And I'll probably go into some clean tones at the very end there as well. But what I did was I created some presets based on what I heard when I jammed through this all for the first time. So this video isn't going to be like my initial reaction. This is me actually having spent quite a bit of time in this plugin already and really digging it. So when we go through the global controls down here, you have your normal input section, right? You do have your gate, you have your drop, which is a transpose, so you can go into lower tunings or higher tunings if you'd like to. Then we go into the pedal section here. What's cool about this is it's made for every style of player in mind as far as like high gain metal tones go. And I say that because you do have a pre-EQ pedal in here, which a lot of other plugins don't include. This is great and very useful for shaping like 7 and 8 string guitar tones because there's a lot of mud and things like that that you don't want hitting the preamp always. And so it's really nice to have that in there. There's not a whole lot of plugins out there that have a pre-EQ pedal built in. Destructor is like an octave pedal, and so you do get some of that sub-octave. It's kind of crazy sounding, honestly. And then you do have the Slaughter, which is an overdrive pedal. I love that it has the mids knob here. It really helps to get that extra little bit of juice out of the signal before it hits the preamp of the amp itself. Then over in the amp section, we have the Flesh Weaver, we have the Servant, and then we have Nail Wound. Now, if we look at Servant, I think we can all guess what that one is based off of. It looks just like a 5150 style amp, and surprise, surprise, I treated it as such when I played through it. But when we go to the cab section here, you'll notice that you have 2 different mics that you can choose from because we are running 2 different cab impulse responses, and they can be any one of the 3, so Flesh Weaver, Servant, or Nail Wound, and you can split those left and right. Using the mic blend, you can go to any percentage that you would like. But then in addition to that, you do have a ton of different microphones to choose from. And you have some extra options. So you have your position and distance like you'd expect, but you have girth and grind so you can get some extra tonal characteristics out of there, which is great because these are pre-EQ'd and everything, so they sit very well in the mix. High and low pass filters. Now, the high and low pass filters are also included over in the EQ section here. So this is a little bit different EQ than you get on a lot of the other amp sims out there. You'll notice that they've very specifically chosen the frequency spectrums that you can actually adjust. And then there's also a sauce button up here. The sauce button adds some pretty damn cool sauce if I don't say so myself. It gives it a lot of girth and extra balls for lack of a better way of explaining that. You'll see what I mean in a little bit here. And if we go over to the effects section, you do have delay and reverb for, you know, those people that can actually play guitar and might play some leads through an amp sim like this. Not really my thing, just because I suck at it. So I'm getting better at it though. Now, if we keep going along the global controls down here, we have tight and smooth. Tight really just puts a low cut over the low end and lets you get rid of the boominess from the cabs if you need to. And then the smooth does kind of the same, but for the high end. And so you can get rid of a lot of those really spiky, ice picky kind of sounds, really smooth out your playing for those leads if you want to. So before we move into the presets I made, let's just go ahead and hear the Flesh Weaver's default tone. All right, so that's Flesh Weaver in a nutshell right there. Flesh Weaver, very, very high gain. What we're going to do though is we're going to switch to the preset that I made, which I called it Flesh Weaver Tight. So you'll hear I really brought down some of that gain. If we go through my preset really quickly here, I made a lot of adjustments to the overdrive pedal. We don't have any drive happening. Level's not quite cranked, but the mids and tone are. If we go to the amp section itself, I pulled down the gain, and honestly, hearing it again, I'm gonna crank that gain back up to about halfway. I'm just a sucker for high gain saturated tones, so I've got to do it, you know? I left everything else pretty much the same except for cranking the mids a little bit just because I like mids and I think they sound very pleasing in a guitar tone. As far as the cabs go, I left it to the Fleshweaver 4x12 for both of them, and I do have the microphone changed on the right-hand side to a condenser, just liked how that sounded a little bit more. In the EQ section is where I have a lot going on though. So if we look at the EQ, I'm bumping quite a bit of 6K, and because it just adds that breath of air to the tone, it lets it sound more open, especially for those chords like that. It just sounds better. Bumping the 3K, leaving the 1K alone, and I'm adding a ton of the 800 back into it. Left everything else alone, but I did turn on the sauce. So let's hear it with and without that sauce. So it kind of sounds thin and lifeless in comparison. And if you're not listening on headphones, I highly suggest you put on some headphones. Phone speakers are not going to do it for this. Turn the sauce back on. And if we listen to the tight knob on and off, so this is with it off. So that's where all that boominess and honestly great low end comes back in. But for a mix, we want to cut that a little bit. So turn on the tight switch. And so it's doing quite a bit. This EQ section is doing a ton of heavy lifting, sounds very musical still, and this would fit very, very well in a high gain metal tone. This is not some low gain tone here. There's a ton of hair to this. There's a ton of grit and saturation. It can go even further. If we flip this Overkill switch real quick. And let's go ahead and crank the gain even further just to be obnoxious. So as you heard, there's gain for days. The Fleshweaver is a high gain monster of an amp head. Sounds ridiculous. And for all those wondering, I am using my GOC Guitars Aluminum Modern. These are the stock Paragon 2.0 pickups in it today. Nothing going on any different. There's no post-processing or anything like that along the signal chain. Not even using EQ unless it's the EQ section built straight into the amp itself. Okay, so next I want to check out the Servant. So the Servant is the amp that looks like it's based on a 5150. And I treated it as such, you know? I cranked the presence down because these amps are hairy as hell. And I have the gain set pretty low. I'm probably gonna crank that gain a little bit because it just sounds good. Lows I left alone, mid I brought up a little bit, highs I brought up a little bit, post gain is low because I don't want the power amp oversaturating the tone. If we go over into the pedal section here, I do have the overdrive on again. I have a little bit of drive happening on it. I have the level pretty far up, mids are not as cranked as on the last tone, and then the tone knob is pretty well cranked. Over in the EQ, you can see it's quite a bit different than I had it on the last amp head, right? So we're cranking the same frequencies here, but not nearly as much. 3 dB here, 3 dB there, and a little bit of the 800 again, not touching anything else here. We do have the sauce on, and I brought a little bit of a low pass filter, and we do still have the tight knob on as well. Cabinet wise, we're pretty much looking at the same, except for we did change the cabinet. We have the Servant 4x12 on this one. It just sounded better, and I'm assuming because it went with this amp, and they did that on purpose. It sounds really good. You'll notice I have messed with the high pass filters on the cabinet section itself this time. So let's go ahead and hear how this sounds. That's the sound that we like. That's some good shit right there. So that one for sure does the thing. That is one of the more pleasing like 5150 style amps that I've heard in a long time. It's fun to play through. It reacts the way that I want it to, and it's just sick. And that was a really simple tone to dial in. I didn't do anything special. You saw everything I did there. I think the biggest difference for me is going to be this overdrive pedal and the way it reacts to both my pickups and then the amp itself. I feel like that's a pretty unique overdrive pedal. I really like it. I would love to have it in a real physical pedal. That'd be pretty sick. All right, next amp, let's go over to the Nail Wound. And so again, you're seeing a theme here. I create a bunch of tight rhythm tones, and the Nail Wound was no different, except for the Nail Wound is a very clean distortion. I like it. There's not a lot of hair to it. It's very tight on its own. You'll see I have the tight knob turned off completely on it this time. If we go over to the pedal section, I have the overdrive in very modest amounts right here. So I did add the drive back in, levels not all the way up. The mids are cranked up and so is the tone. If we go over to the amp itself, I left almost all of this at noon. So overkill is off, volume is where it was. Treble, middle, and bass are where they were, which is noon. And the gain I cranked just a little bit, not very much. EQ section again is where I'm brightening up the high end at the 3K and the 6K and a little bit at the 1.6, and that just sounded good to my ears. High and low pass filters left alone, but again, that sauce is on. That sauce is doing something and I like it. I need everything to have the sauce on it. So this is a perfect metalcore sounding amp, right? But this can also clean up very well and do like pop punk, for instance. So like I said, it can do pop punk, it can do everything in between. What I want to do now though, is I want to add some effects. I didn't do this when I was jamming on it earlier, so let's go ahead and turn on the delay and reverb and see what we get just right off the bat. Alright, so we got the extreme like ambient like wee-woos and everything. It sounds great. That is what I would put over a really heavy chorus is what that would sound sick over. All right, let's bring the gate down a little bit, choking out the notes there a little bit too much. Yeah, that's definitely doing the thing. Let's bring the mix and time down on the reverb. All right, a little bit too much on the delay as well, and a little bit too fast. Let's go ahead and add the filter. So I think that can use a little bit more gain. Let's bring the gain up here. Ooh, we've got some noise there. Let's bring the gate back up. All right, so we know it can do the lead tones fairly damn well. Let's go ahead and do some clean tones. I'm going to turn off the effects so we can just dial in the amp for a clean tone first. And I'm going to keep it on this amp because it's a very clean amp. Let's turn off the overdrive. Ooh. Wasn't kidding, it's a very sparkling clean amp. It sounds honestly great as it is. It doesn't even need effects. Let's go ahead and turn the delay and everything back on though. Nice. Let's bring the reverb up a little bit more for that ambiance and the mix on the delay. Well, we didn't come here to do clean channel stuff today, but if you need to write something clean, that's got you back. Let's bring the low cut back down. We want to add some low back into the reverb. So cleans are also very easy to get out of this. And again, I'm on the nail wound amp here, and I left the cabinet and everything alone. I left that on the Flesh Weaver cabinet, which sounds fantastic for a clean tone too. I'm gonna need to save this one as well. I might mess with the EQ a little bit more, maybe turn off the sauce and everything, but as is, that's a very usable clean tone. I could deal with that any day. That would probably sound great with most of my pickups too. But yeah, the Tone Suite Distant is a hell of an amp sim, honestly. Sounds great on all three of the different amp heads. I think this would sound even better in a demo mix, which I didn't do for this just because I wanted to get straight into the guitar tones and not just waste time with a demo mix that doesn't let you hear how the guitar tones themselves actually sound isolated. So if you want to hear this in a demo mix, let me know, because I'm writing some pretty cool stuff right now, not gonna lie, and it'd be cool to use this in it. But that's it. Let me know what you think about the WaveMind Tone Suite Distant. I'm going to probably ask them if I can check out a couple of their other plugins, because if this one is that good, then the rest of them have got to be great as well. But link to this is going to be down in the description below. It's not an affiliate link or anything like that, but feel free to pick this up if you want it. It's a fantastic plugin, and I think it covers a very large range of guitar tones that you'd be able to get out of it. If you all have any questions about it, let me know down in the comments below. Thank you all for watching today. I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.